Good afternoon. I'm Charlotte, and you are watching The Ugly Atheist. And in this episode, I wanted to discuss um, the whole idea of wokeness and is it still alive? Is it still thriving and um, kicking? And I know since the election of Donald J. Trump, we've seen a number of corporations, mega corporations like uh, Target and Facebook, for example, sort of backtracking on the woke ideology. And I believe they are pulling back from DEI practices. And does this indicate perhaps an end to the woke ideology? Um, there's a couple things that I wanted to say about that. First of all, though, we should probably define what wokeism is or what woke is. Um, and I know there are a lot of different definitions, and there are definitions that come from right and left wing sources, which, if there's a political bias, we might do well to avoid those definitions because they are inherently biased. Um, so I am pulling a definition from Webster's dictionary, Merriam-Webster's. Um, and this keeps it simple, sort of. Um, it says, aware of and actively attentive to important societal facts and issues, and in parentheses, especially issues of racial and social justice. So it defines woke as an awareness, not just an awareness, though, an actively attentive, um, particularly around race and social justice. So, what that means, what that translates to for the average person is to become very, very vocal and very uh, willing to boycott or cancel different organizations or people that appear to you to be um furthering social injustice or racism. Um, and on its face, it seems like a good thing at face value. You know, it's good to be attentive to important social issues, and it's important to sort of speak out against racism and social injustice. I mean, we all kind of hope for that. But what this whole woke movement has become, and what they're leaving out of this definition, is that for social justice against racism and other social issues to exist and to flourish, you absolutely need to have someone who is in the villain role. And if the supply of villainy does not meet the demand of social justice, we have a situation where a villain is invented, sort of like in the story of Don Quixote de la Mancha. He pretends that windmills are giants and he rides toward them with all his fury, shouting and attacking with I think he had a javelin or a joust or something, attacking these windmills. And that is to say, where no villain exists, one needs to be created. And it begs the question, why? If you can't find the social justice you're angsting about, why must you invent it? And this kind of ties in with, I think we discussed this in a previous episode about human beings' need for a a goal that is larger than themselves, a purpose, if you will. And in the past, of course, Christianity or other religions would fill that role perfectly. In fact, those religions were invented specifically to fill that need in humanity, to fight for something or to live for something larger than ourselves. And if you grow up in a more secular society and you don't have religion in your life, and you sort of reject the tradition of your elders and your family and um, forefathers and so on, then you're left with this emptiness where you try to fill it with something of value, something of social value. And this is where wokeness has sort of become, as I'm sure you've heard it described, as a new religion. And as wonderful as it is to stamp out racism and to fight for social justice, um, if there isn't that much left nowadays to fight against compared to, say, in the 50s and 60s when Jim Crow laws were rampant and redlining, and there's some remnants of that today, but not nearly enough to warrant the kind of outcry we hear from people who claim to be woke. And so we have a situation where a villain needs to be invented and a scapegoat needs to be imagined. And anytime there is a social movement where a scapegoat is required, you are going to build division. So we have, in the case of wokeism, the villain is just white people in general and privilege. Um, so now, white people, as with any race, have their sordid history, their horrible way that they treated other peoples, and I think white people are targeted frequently nowadays is because their um, egregious behavior toward other races and classes has been in more recent history, and the fact that Europeans just so dominated uh, other peoples around the world and sort of forced our culture upon others that and power was not won back from white people by force. It was more the guilty conscience of white people that sort of let power go voluntarily. And this, I can see how this can be angering to a lot of races, and might feel like a handout. It might make them feel inferior, and this is a problem. So white people seem to have been jumping on the woke bandwagon probably more than anybody because of this guilt that we're feeling. In fact, most of the damage done during the summer of love, back when COVID was happening and the lockdowns were happening, most of the damage was done by white people on behalf of people of color, or so they claim, so they think, so they feel. And if, in fact, if you were to remove white people from the equation, the damage would have been pretty minimal, because people of color don't normally engage in that level of destruction. White people we're kind of our own enemy in that regard. So at the same time, there are other white people who aren't overcome with guilt. Because they know that it's their, you know, cruddy ancestors that did all this bad stuff and not them. So it's like this is a completely different people, completely different group of white people nowadays. So I don't feel like I need to feel guilty about what my ancestors did. Sure, it sucked, but I'm not doing any of those things, and I'm being as kind as possible to all human beings of all colors, treating everybody the same. And I think it's that group of white people who began to feel attacked by wokeism, because for wokeism to thrive, as I mentioned before, it needs a scapegoat. It needs to villainize a certain class or group of people. And in the case of wokeism, it has chosen white people, and not only that, but affluent white people. Um, and those are the very same people who have embraced wokeism out of their guilt, mostly, apparently, statistically, it seems like affluent white women. And but at some point, there's only so many ways and so many uh, attacks you can levy on a group before they begin to start to feel like they're being unjustly targeted. And I think that's sort of what has happened in this last election. Enough people have uh, sort of said, "Okay, I get it. We're not the best race. We've done some bad things in our past, but enough is enough. We you can't keep kicking us and expecting us to take it for for forever. At some point we got to say, okay, we've paid our dues. Let's get back to the business of healing racial relations and just being normal people about it. um, and I think we that's sort of what brought more people to the polls. And I think that show of that very clear message that I think was sent in this last election is having these large corporations sort of rethink their position and rethink their stance. And just as a caveat here, or an aside rather, um, these large mega corporations don't have any moral standing at all. They're clearly opportunistic and exploitative. They'll go with whatever is the popular sentiment of the time socially. So wokeism was never the majority, but they were a very vocal minority, and they had a council power. So of course, large corporations decided to get on board with the DEI and whatever it would take to appease this group. And now that the majority of the American people have sort of had their fill of wokeism, we see these corporations pretending like we're re-examining our ethos. Um, and of course, we don't look to these companies as bastions of morality anyway, but to have them switch so suddenly on a dime, perfectly timed with the election, that obviously reveals their exploitative and opportunistic nature, and thereafter their only thing that guides their morality is the almighty dollar. But you don't need me to tell you that. So wokeism is probably not dead, because there are social justice issues will continue to inspire people to make things better, and as it should. I think we need to find where the real problems lie, and not just pick one group of people as the culprit, because then you're a fascist. People who are strong adherers to wokeism tend to be fascistic and authoritarian, and we don't want that. There are more productive ways to address social issues, and racism does. It's always going to exist, but in the 80s and 90s it went down significantly in the early 2000s, I guess. And then people would, as Morgan Freeman said, people weren't really talking about it that much. But yeah, enter wokeism, and hey, let's resurrect all those old feelings and thoughts, and get it to the forefront so people can fight about it again. It's very, very divisive, and it's not the most productive way to address social issues. I think Christianity probably is a good way of addressing some of these social issues. I remember when I first became a Christian, and it was fantastic to see people of all walks of life, abled or disabled, or you know, um, any race, any ethnicity, everyone's coming together to worship and sing, and it was just a beautiful thing. And if we can get back to some kind of model like that, it doesn't have to be Christianity. And even though I'm an atheist, I would welcome that kind of an effort towards unity. Um, but I think the American people have had enough of the divisiveness, and on both sides, to be honest. And what I also think about wokeism is that there are people that are have genuine hearts about social justice issues, and they are perhaps a bit naive, but they're, again, going back to the Don Quixote um, analogy, where they think they're doing a good thing. They're not completely knowledgeable about the reality of a situation, about society, but they they've learned something new, and they feel like something must be done, and God bless those people, where they think they want to make a difference, and that's fantastic. It's a good place for your heart to be, to want to make a difference and want to do something positive for the world around you. But I think that in the case of wokeism, there are some nefarious actors behind the scenes, possibly, who are trying to promote communism. Um, and anybody who is trying to promote communism and hiding it behind social justice issues, they're either horribly naive to a dangerous level, or they are nefarious, malicious nefariants. I'll just make up a word, nefariant. They are nefariants. Um, and we need to look out for those people, and they cannot be allowed to gain any kind of power or traction, because the message is hidden behind something that we can all get behind, which is social justice. Um, and going really quick to the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, um, I I did touch on this on a previous episode, where I think having DEI hiring practices in some fields, in some industries, is fine, but I think that to across the board, across all industries, is very dangerous, because you are no longer dealing with merit. You're not dealing with the best of the best. You are, if it's an industry such as being an airline pilot, or a surgeon, brain surgeon, or anything that where people's lives are on the line, don't want to and you don't want to adopt DEI practices, because that's going to be very, very dangerous. That's what I wanted to say today. I think wokeism um, is largely an okay thing, in so much as it's not commandeered by nefarious people trying to push communism. We need to keep a watchful eye on the woke agenda, and it's probably going to, during the Trump years, it's probably going to fall back and regroup and come back as something else at the end of his term. Um, but I don't think it's gonna. I don't think it's over. I don't think it's dead. And as long as there are people who fall for, or who are willing to do something about social injustice, and people who are without religion, so they think that they need something purposeful in their lives, they're going to be drawn to that. And yeah, so I would just say we should keep a watchful eye on that, and hope it doesn't work towards better resolutions, more positive resolutions to apparent social inequality, and understand that wokeism is not being practiced as it's defined. It's not the way we should be going. So anyway, I'm Charlotte. You're watching The Ugly Atheist. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next week.